The Rings of Power. I'm going to try and start this out on a positive note for once. The scenery in this show is beautiful. Some of the scenes look like oil paintings. The show was filmed in Auckland, New Zealand, as well as Bovingdon Airfield, northwest of London in England, and Brace Studios in Berkshire, west of London in England. The on-film scenery is very reminiscent of parts of England, but further north than where they filmed. The sweeping hills and mountains evoke images of Cumbria and the Peak District. But if you plan on going to either, maybe go in summer. They can both get a bit too fresh in December. All of that nice scenery fits very well with Tolkien. So, the Rings of Power, or should it be the Rings of Power? Because for some reason, lots of the words from Tolkien now have rolling R's like the cast of Spaniards. It's a weird choice.
So when the great foe Morgoth...
For those of you in a hurry, the TLDR is, the show is subpar. Not great, but it's not as bad as the promotional material made it look.
Right? If like Sauron is hot, I feel like people will be like, I can fix him.
I read about it. We're introduced to the first black elf. We're introduced to the first female dwarf.
Oh, I would say like expansive, because we're getting this like whole new look into the Second Age on screen, and it's gonna be so amazing. I also want to say representative, because we're getting like more diversity within this series. Like,
all right, let's talk main characters. Give me your theories of who you might have seen in the teaser trailer.
I've seen a lot of talking about my girl Galadriel.
The show is quite bad, but it's not that bad. It's not She-Hulk Eternia lore bad, though that is admittedly setting the bar extremely low. I didn't find the show massively offensive. It didn't make me angry. In fact, if anything, episode 1 was slightly boring. All of the press with the endless talk of the first elf of colour and the first female dwarf of colour were a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. The changes for representation make very little impression on the show itself. The show so far doesn't push the activism as much as the promotional material that annoyed a lot of the fans suggested, that there are clumsy and frequent allusions to racism.
Was it here?
Oh, let it go, knife is!
Maybe I'm like the frog in the water being slowly boiled at this point, but apart from the Rey Skywalker-like treatment
Oh my girl Galadriel.
the activism hasn't been that jarring. Sadly, you can still hear the drumbeat of activists in the deep. It raises the issue of, is it ever acceptable to change someone else's artistic work to match your own vision and political beliefs? It also has the prequel problem that I discussed at length in my review of episode 1 of House of the Dragon. This being that when Galadriel's in a fight scene, you know she's in no real danger. As if she ever would be, because she breezes through every obstacle with unearned ease. You know she's in no danger because this series is allegedly in canon with the Peter Jackson films, so she literally cannot die. We know she's alive in the future. So you know that she'll live, because if she doesn't, Lord of the Rings, the good one, can't happen, because in the future she's still alive. Much of the criticism and problems that the show has faced could have been easily avoided. Amazon could have just written their own fantasy series unrelated to Lord of the Rings, their own individual artistic work, with elves of whatever colour they wanted. Fill your boots. Have every elf and dwarf the colour of Charlie Murphy. Pretty much nobody would have cared. Instead, they riled up the Tolkien fans and made a rod for their own back, to the extent that their own promotional materials caused such a backlash that they were forced to take them down. In a recent interview with GQ, Lenny Henry, an actor from the show, was asked, "In the original Lord of the Rings trilogy 20 years ago, there were no black characters, but this show is different. It feels like the big new fantasy franchises are finally diversifying." And he responded, "There's a real sense of trying to be more inclusive than we were in this world." House of the Dragon star Steve Toussaint keeps saying, the purists were saying things about his casting in the show, God bless them. They have no trouble believing in a dragon, but they do have trouble believing that a black person could be a member of the court. That wasn't the issue though. House of the Dragon is not breaking new ground in casting black actors. There were already black people in Game of Thrones. There was this lady and her nude scenes, God bless her. There was this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy. The issue is that this character in the source material is a white man. Why are the creatives race swapping characters? Why do they feel entitled to change someone else's creative work? But if George R.R. Martin's happy with it, then that is at least better than Tolkien, who can't give his consent. It becomes even more damaging if it's used as a vessel to insert political narratives into the show that the writer didn't initially intend. Lenny goes on. Boy, does he go on. But they do have trouble believing that a black person could be a member of the court, or that a black person could be a hobbit or an elf, and actually, storytellers can do what they want, because they're storytellers. But actually, Lenny, storytellers can't do whatever they want, because this isn't their art to do what they want with. This is someone else's art that they're defacing. You also can't do what you want because it has to be in canon with Lord of the Rings. You can't turn Galadriel into someone that can cut down a troll in 5 seconds without causing problems for the rest of the story. Remember this scene? Frodo nearly died. They almost failed and lost the ring and doomed the world multiple times. If only they'd have had someone that could cut down a troll in 5 seconds with them. If only they'd had an unstoppable warrior of peerless martial prowess. And now it turns out that they did. She was there all along. So you did what you want, and now you've made problems for the entire rest of the story. You've now made plot holes in Lord of the Rings. And Lenny goes on. In the reimagining of these stories from 1,000 years ago, they're not part of the canon that everybody knows. This is a reimagining and a reweaving of the story. And the Rings of Power showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay have just gone, what if? The greatest 2 words in storytelling, what if? I find myself asking, what if Lenny Henry would go away? Maybe he's trying to live down the time he spent on the BBC's literal black and white minstrel show that ran from 1958 to 1978, and would maybe be the worst thing they'd done if it wasn't for Jimmy Savile.
We're dreaming of a white Christmas.
You got no chance.
I don't want to be too hard on Lenny, so before anyone gets their knives out over that, bear in mind that Lenny was only 17 years old at this point, and came to greatly regret it. He went on to do shows such as Tiswas. Tiswas was a kids' TV show that ran in the UK from 1974 to 1982.
That's fun, but she's obviously very grateful anyway. Hey Sludge, you're from Canon. What's it?
He eventually got his own show called The Lenny Henry Show.
Oh yeah, bit of a rainy old day.
Can I help you?
Well, I hope so. I'm not going to photograph myself, am I? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You here for the shoot?
Yeah.
You know it's page 3.
Yeah.
Then what the hell are you doing here?
What do you mean?
You're not an attractive young lady, and you haven't got any...
I see. I know what this is. It's because I'm a black man, isn't it?
No.
Yeah, media conspiracy. If we ain't dancing and singing and burning and looting, you don't want to know. Yeah, child of destiny, prayers to Beyonce. Shut down photographers again.
Lenny is quoted as saying, "Experiencing racism made me want to change things." I don't know if this is some kind of cosmic joke, that he's become the person putting black actors into roles where they don't even fit, like the character from his own skit. It's like a Greek tragedy. He's turned into the thing that he once mocked.